The stars stretched like rivers of light across the viewing deck of the Resolute, a human battleship built for war but now used as the guardian of a fragile peace. Inside its steel corridors, everything was measured, disciplined, and precise. Every crew member knew their duty. Every order was followed without hesitation. That was how humans survived among the endless dangers of the galaxy. But not everyone aboard the Resolute believed in discipline. Princess Lyra of the Solarian Empire stood by the window, her silver blue eyes reflecting the void beyond. Her hair shimmered like strands of crystal, and her long robe of deep violet swayed slightly as the ship drifted through space. She was royalty, trained in diplomacy, not combat. Her people were elegant, their worlds rich in beauty, but they were not known for endurance or hardship. The humans were different. The captain of the Resolute, Commander Adrian Holt, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark eyes that carried years of war. He had been placed in charge of guarding the Solarian princess during a joint mission that could shape the future of both their species. His orders were simple: keep the princess safe, no matter what. But the princess was not someone who liked being guarded. "Do you really expect me to stay locked inside these dull metal walls for weeks?" she asked one morning, her voice soft yet laced with sharpness. The captain stood with his hands behind his back. "This is a warship, not a palace. You will stay in your quarters or move only under escort. Safety comes before comfort." Her lips curved into a small, defiant smile. Safety or control? Perhaps humans are too fearful to understand freedom. Holt did not rise to her provocation. His voice remained steady. "On this ship, rules are not suggestions. They are survival." But Princess Lyra had already decided she would not obey. That night, when the corridors dimmed and the crew settled into their rotations, she slipped out of her chamber. Her soft shoes made little sound against the metal floor. She had studied the crew's routines for days, noting when the guards changed, when the halls emptied. She wanted to see the ship with her own eyes, not through escorted tours designed to impress, but as it truly was. The first chamber she entered was the gravity training hall. Her people lived on light worlds, where movement was graceful and effortless. Here she found rows of humans running under artificial gravity so heavy, it made their bodies strain with each step. Sweat poured down their faces, yet they did not stop. Curious, she stepped inside when the room emptied. The control panel glowed faintly. She raised the gravity by mistake, and instantly her body felt as though a mountain had fallen on her shoulders. She staggered, her knees bending, her breath caught in her throat. Each step felt like dragging chains, her heart raced. How can humans endure this? She forced herself to take 3 more steps, trembling before shutting off the machine and stumbling. Back to the corridor. Her pride burned. She would not admit defeat, not to herself, and certainly not to the human captain. Further down, she discovered the combat simulation chamber. Holograms flared to life, replicas of alien raiders humans often fought. She watched from the shadows, as soldiers trained, their movements sharp and efficient. Every strike was practiced, every dodge calculated. When they left, she entered. The simulation activated automatically. A figure of light rushed toward her with a weapon raised. Instinct made her retreat, but the ground tripped her. She raised her hands, untrained and unready. The hologram struck, not real, but powerful enough to knock her down. Her body hit the floor hard, pain flashing across her side. She gasped and rolled away, struggling to rise. Again the hologram charged. She barely avoided it, but her balance faltered. The program ended when it detected her weakness, the light dissolving into nothingness. She lay there, chest heaving, her body trembling. Her people were scholars, artists, diplomats. They had never trained like this. Humans fight as if every day is their last, she whispered to herself, and yet they survive. Hours passed as she wandered the ship. Each place told the same story. Human strength, human endurance, human discipline. She had wanted to laugh at their strictness, but now her body ached from only a taste of what they endured daily. At last she returned to her quarters, sweat clinging to her brow, her limbs heavy. She sank into her seat, wrapping her robe tighter around her. For the first time, she felt something she did not want to admit: weakness. The next morning, Captain Holt entered her chamber unannounced. His sharp eyes scanned her pale face and weary posture. "You left your quarters," he said flatly. She lifted her chin, masking her exhaustion with pride. "I wish to see your ship. Am I a prisoner, Captain?" "You are under protection," he replied. His voice carried steel. "If you had been caught in a live drill, you could have been injured. If you had entered the engineering deck, you could have been killed. Discipline is not about control, Princess. It is about survival." She tried to meet his gaze, but his words struck deeper than she wished to show. Her muscles still ached from her reckless exploration. "Perhaps your humans are simply too fragile without rules," she said coldly, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. He leaned closer, his eyes unwavering. "Or perhaps your people have never faced a universe that does not care about beauty or pride. Out here, weakness is a death sentence. And yesterday, Princess, you nearly paid that price." Her breath caught. Did he know? Had he seen her stumble in the gravity hall or fall in the simulation chamber? His tone suggested he did not need proof. He simply knew she was unprepared. Lyra looked away, unwilling to admit anything. But deep inside, she could not ignore what she had felt. The crushing weight of human training, the harsh strike of a hologram, the fire in her lungs. Her body had already begun paying the price of her defiance. Yet a small, stubborn part of her whispered she would not give in. She would not let these humans think her weak, and so the defiant princess decided. If her body must suffer to prove her spirit unbroken, then so be it. But she had no idea how much further her limits would be tested. The Resolute moved through the dark sea of space with quiet strength, its engines humming like a steady heartbeat. To the crew, it was a familiar sound, the sound of safety, of routine, of order. To Princess Lyra, however, it was the sound of confinement. She stood by her chamber door, hands folded behind her back, her expression calm but her heart still restless. Captain Holt's words from the previous day lingered in her mind. Out here, weakness is a death sentence. Weakness. The word had burned in her chest all night. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. On her homeworld, she was praised, admired, sheltered. Here, she was treated like another life to protect, another responsibility. She wanted to prove she was more than that. Her chance came sooner than she expected. The next morning, Holt summoned her to the training deck. He stood with several officers, his presence steady, his dark eyes sharp. "Princess," he began, "you disobeyed orders. You wandered into restricted areas, placed yourself at risk, and ignored my command." She lifted her chin. "I wish to understand your ship, Captain. I do not regret learning with my own eyes." Holt studied her for a moment. "Then learn properly." He gestured to the training hall behind him. Inside, soldiers were running under heavy gravity, sparring with precise movements and practicing survival drills. If you want to understand why humans live by discipline, you will experience it yourself. No more sneaking through shadows. You will train openly, under my command. Lyra blinked. For a moment she thought he was jesting, but Holt's tone was as unshakable as stone. "You would have me train like a soldier?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said, "unless you fear the challenge." The word fear stung worse than any insult. The Princess of Solarian would not retreat. She straightened her shoulders. "Very well, Captain, I accept." The challenge began in the gravity chamber. The air buzzed as the artificial force increased. At first the difference was subtle, but within moments Lyra's limbs felt heavier, her body dragged down as though invisible chains wrapped around her. The human soldiers jogged past her with determined strides, sweat glistening but movement steady. She tried to keep pace. Each step pressed into her bones. Her breath grew ragged, her legs burned. She had danced in royal halls with perfect grace, but this was not grace. This was survival against invisible weight. After only a few laps, her body begged her to stop. Holt's voice cut across the chamber. Focus your mind. Do not let your body control you. Humans endure because we refuse to stop. She gritted her teeth and forced another step. Then another. The floor seemed to tilt under her. Pain spread across her muscles, but pride pushed her forward. By the time the session ended, she collapsed against the wall, her chest heaving. The crew expected her to give up. But when Holt asked, "Had enough?" she lifted her chin, though her voice trembled. Not yet. The next exercise was zero-gravity maneuvers. The chamber shifted, gravity vanishing. Soldiers launched themselves from wall to wall with precision, using thruster packs to adjust direction. Lyra floated clumsily at first, her arms flailing. The room spun around her. A soldier caught her wrist before she struck the wall too hard. "Control your movement, Princess," he advised gently before pushing her forward. She tried again. Her motions were awkward, her timing poor. But slowly she began to understand. Movement required patience, small corrections, not wild thrashing. Her breathing steadied. By the end of the exercise, she managed to cross the chamber without crashing. Holt's eyes narrowed, not with disapproval, but with a faint trace of respect. She was learning. But the hardest test came with the combat simulation. The chamber lit, up with holographic enemies, armored raiders, creatures of light and shadow, humans trained with fluid movements, striking, dodging, working as one. Lyra entered the simulation, her body tense. The first enemy lunged. She reacted too late, the blow knocking her to the ground. She scrambled up, her heart pounding. Another enemy attacked. She raised her arm instinctively, blocking poorly, and pain shot through her side as the projection struck. Holt's voice echoed. "Do not waste energy. Focus. Every move must have purpose." Lyra staggered to her feet. Again the hologram charged. This time she sidestepped, barely escaping the strike. Her movements were clumsy, her body untrained, but she refused to retreat. Each time she fell, she rose again, her robe torn, her skin bruised, her pride burning. Hours seemed to pass in that chamber. By the time Holt called an end, she collapsed onto the floor, her hair damp with sweat, her chest rising and falling. Like she had climbed a mountain, the crew whispered among themselves. Some admired her spirit, others doubted she could endure more, but none could deny her courage. Later, as she sat in the medical bay with a small patch on her bruised arm, Holt stood beside her. "You lasted longer than I expected," he admitted. His tone was not warm, but neither was it cold. It was the voice of a commander who recognized effort. Lyra looked at him, her eyes sharp despite her exhaustion. "Do you humans always push yourselves to such limits?" "Yes," he said simply. "Because the galaxy does not forgive weakness. Every soldier here trains not for pride, but because their lives, and the lives of others, depend on it." Her gaze lowered. She thought of her people who lived in comfort, who never faced such hardships. She thought of herself, struggling to take steps under human gravity, collapsing under strikes of light. Her body was fragile compared to theirs, and yet she had not yielded. "I will continue," she said quietly. Holt studied her face as if searching for falsehood. At last he nodded. "Very well. Tomorrow you begin survival drills." That night, alone in her quarters, Lyra touched her arm where the bruise lingered beneath the patch. Her body ached as if fire had seeped into every bone. But beneath the pain, she felt something strange, something she had never known before. Not fear, not shame, strength. It was small, buried deep. But it was there. Each challenge had hurt her, yet each had also revealed that she could endure more than she believed. For the first time in her life, she began to wonder if her pride was not enough. Perhaps strength was not about titles or beauty, but about enduring, when the body begged for rest. Perhaps humans were not strong because they were built stronger, but because they refused to stop. As she lay on her bed, the hum of the ship surrounding her, she whispered to herself, "I will not fail." Not again. She did not yet know how far the human challenges would push her, She did not yet understand how much her body would resist, how much her spirit would be tested. But Princess Lyra of the Solarian Empire, once defiant and dismissive, was beginning to change. Her body still paid the price of every mistake. Her muscles still screamed with pain. But in her heart, a seed of determination had been planted, and under the watchful eyes of Captain Holt and the human crew, that seed would either grow into strength or break her completely. The Resolute glided through the silent dark of space, a fortress of steel carrying its crew toward the unknown. Inside, however, there was nothing silent about the training decks. Every day rang with the sound of running boots, the clash of weapons, in drills and the shouts of orders. For Princess Lyra, the days had become a trial. She had stepped willingly into the human captain's challenge, but her body paid the cost with every sunrise. Her arms trembled from weight training, her legs burned from endless running, and her lungs still struggled under human gravity. Yet, each morning when Captain Holt looked at her with those steady eyes, she forced herself to rise and continue. She had sworn she would not yield. That morning, Holt called her to the survival deck. The room was vast, filled with simulations designed to prepare soldiers for hostile planets. The air smelled of metal and ozone. Soldiers were already there, checking gear, tightening straps, preparing for drills. Holt stepped forward, his expression calm but firm. Today, Princess, you will face survival training. Combat and gravity drills test strength and endurance, but survival drills test the will to keep moving when everything is against you. Lyra straightened her posture. I am ready. He studied her as though weighing the truth of her words, then nodded. We'll see. The simulation chamber lit up, its walls transforming into a harsh alien landscape. The ground cracked with jagged stone, the sky burned with red light, and the air shimmered as though heavy with heat. This is a replica of Zakar 9, Holt explained, a planet where human scouts trained for endurance. High gravity, extreme temperature, unstable ground. Your task is simple. Reach the extraction point before the time ends. Simple, he said. But Lyra could already feel the ground pressing against her feet like lead. The drill began. At first she tried to move quickly, but every step dragged her body down. The gravity felt worse than the training hall. Her breaths came sharp and shallow, each one tearing at her chest. Around her, the soldiers advanced with steady rhythm, their faces tight with focus. She stumbled on uneven stone, her knees nearly buckling. Pride alone pushed her forward. Minutes turned into hours in her mind. Sweat soaked her robe, her limbs trembled, her throat burned from the heavy air. Her body begged her to stop, to fall, to surrender. But Holt's voice echoed from somewhere behind her. Keep moving, Princess. No one survives if they stop. She forced another step, then another. Her legs shook violently. The world blurred around her. She pressed her hands to her knees, trying to catch breath, but the air offered no comfort. When she lifted her head again, the extraction point shimmered far away, a beacon of safety, too far. Her spirit wavered for the first time. The terrain grew worse. Cracks split the ground, forcing her to climb over jagged rocks. Once her foot slipped, and she crashed to her knees, pain shooting up her leg. She bit her lip hard, refusing to cry out. Soldiers passed her, their discipline keeping them moving. Some glanced at her with concern, others with doubt. Still she rose again. Still she walked, her robe tore against sharp stone, dirt staining the fabric. Her skin burned under the simulated sun. Time dragged on, every heartbeat louder than the last. Her thoughts began to blur. Why am I here? Why do I suffer like this? I am a princess, not a soldier. But another voice rose inside her, quieter but stronger. Because you chose this. Because weakness is not enough. At last, her body betrayed her. Her legs collapsed beneath her weight, and she fell hard onto the stone. The impact rattled her bones. Her arms shook as she tried to push herself up, but nothing obeyed. Her chest heaved violently, her vision dimming. The simulation continued around her, merciless. The beacon of extraction flickered in the distance, unreachable. She lay there, sweat dripping down her face, her heart pounding like a drum. The proud princess of Solarian, defeated by the training she had insisted on facing. The simulation ended with a harsh buzz. The false landscape dissolved back into the metallic walls of the chamber. Soldiers removed their gear, murmuring quietly. Holt approached, his shadow falling over her as she struggled to sit upright. His expression was unreadable. Neither anger nor triumph, only calm observation. "You pushed too far," he said. Her throat was too dry to answer. She stared at him. Shame burning her cheeks. "You wanted to prove you could endure like humans," Holt continued. "But endurance is not just pride. It is knowing when to stand and when to fall back. You fought against your body until it broke." Lyra lowered her eyes. For the first time, she could not speak. Later, in the medical bay, a cooling patch pressed against her forehead as machines monitored her pulse. Her body trembled with exhaustion, every muscle aching. She felt stripped of dignity. Holt entered quietly. He stood by her bed, his arms folded. "You are not weak, princess," he said. "You lasted longer than most who attempt that course the first time. But you cannot ignore limits. Even humans collapse if they push without sense." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "Then why train so hard? Why torture your own bodies, if you know they will break?" His eyes softened slightly, though his voice remained steady. "Because when the moment comes, when the mission matters, when lives hang on a thread, we must be ready to go further than we think possible. We train not because we enjoy pain, but because survival demands it. Discipline gives us strength, to endure when everything else fails." She listened in silence. His words struck deeper than any wound. That night, Lyra lay awake in her quarters. The hum of the ship filled the silence, steady and calm. Her body still ached, but it was not the pain that kept her from sleep. It was the memory of falling, the moment when her strength vanished, when her body refused to rise again. She had thought pride was enough. She had thought defiance could carry her. But the galaxy was not a royal court. Out here, pride broke against reality, and yet she remembered something else. She had walked farther than she ever thought possible. She had endured longer than she believed she could. Even in failure, she had gone further than before. Was this what humans meant by strength? Not never falling, but rising each time until the body no longer could? Her hands clenched the sheets. She whispered to herself, voice weak but certain, "I will rise again, I will learn." The next day, when Holt arrived at her quarters, he expected resistance or excuses. Instead, he found the princess standing, still pale, still tired but ready in training clothes. "I failed yesterday," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "But I am not finished." Holt studied her. A faint glimmer of respect touched his eyes. "Very well, princess," he said. "We begin again." And so, despite her breaking point, despite the weakness of her body, Lyra chose not to stop. She would pay the price again and again if she must, until she learned what it truly meant to endure. Princess Lyra sat quietly on the edge of the training deck, her fingers brushing the cold metal floor. Sweat still clung to her skin from yesterday's survival drills, and every muscle in her body ached, like she had been struck by an invisible hammer. Yet despite the exhaustion, she felt something new, a flicker of understanding. Humans were not cruel. They were not eager to see her suffer. They were trying to teach her. Captain Holt watched her from across the room, arms folded, expression calm as ever. He did not rush to speak or offer sympathy. That was human discipline. Strength through patience, guidance without indulgence. "You are learning," he said finally. His voice carried the weight of experience, but also the quiet respect that only came from watching someone fight through their limits. "I am trying," Lyra admitted, her voice soft but firm. "Trying is not enough," Holt replied. "Humans endure because they adapt. Every challenge teaches a lesson. Yesterday your body failed, but your spirit persisted. That is the first step." Lyra studied him, thinking about the hours she had stumbled over jagged rocks in the simulation, her legs refusing to move, her lungs burning. She had wanted to stop, but something inside had forced her to rise each time. Holt called it spirit. She had only thought it stubbornness. The first lesson began with routine and preparation. Holt led her to the training hall where soldiers were, running laps under heavy gravity. This time Lyra did not rush to keep pace. She observed first, noticing the rhythm, the way each human adjusted their steps, how they breathed in steady cycles. "You watch first," Holt instructed. "Understanding comes before action." For hours she observed. She noticed subtle details. The soldiers shifted weight to ease pressure on their knees, adjusted their posture to conserve energy, and communicated quietly to correct mistakes. Each action had purpose. None was wasted. When Holt finally allowed her to join, she tried to replicate their movements. Her first steps were awkward. She stumbled. Her muscles screamed. But she corrected herself slowly, remembering what she had seen. By the end of the session, she could run without as much strain. Not perfectly, but better. Her body was learning, and more importantly, her mind was learning to guide it. Next came teamwork drills. Lyra had always acted alone, relying on her title and wits. Her people valued individual skill and cleverness. Humans valued cooperation. The exercise involved carrying heavy cargo across uneven terrain, requiring synchronized movement. At first, she tried to lead, thinking her judgment superior. The cargo wobbled, almost tipping over. "Do not assume control," Holt said firmly. "Work with others. Listen, adjust, follow when necessary. Survival is a team effort." Reluctantly, Lyra fell into line with the soldiers. She mirrored their movements, waited for their signals, and followed rather than leading. Slowly, the load stabilized. By the time they reached the finish point, she realized something profound. Humans were strong not just because of individual endurance, but because each person supported the others. The mental lessons were harder. Holt led her to a quiet room filled with holographic puzzles and strategy simulations. Unlike physical drills, these tested her mind. She had to solve complex problems under time pressure, while her body still ached from training. At first, she struggled. She wanted to rely on intuition, on clever guesses, as her people often did. But the simulations required patience, methodical thinking, and planning for mistakes. "Do not rush," Holt said. "Even the strongest body fails without a prepared mind." Lyra swallowed her pride and slowed her pace. She analyzed the problems step by step. Slowly, her solutions improved. By the end of the session, she completed every puzzle, not with brilliance, but with careful logic. The lesson was clear. Survival demanded balance between mind and body. During meals, she observed the human crew. Unlike her own people, who dined in luxury and ceremony, humans ate simply, efficiently, and often while planning, strategizing, or discussing missions. There was no idle chatter, no pretentiousness. Lyra realized she had underestimated them. They were disciplined, but not rigid. They were strong, but not reckless. They endured, adapted, and thrived in ways her sheltered upbringing had never prepared her for. Even small actions carried meaning. How they washed, organized their gear, and maintained focus on tiny details, all contributed to survival. Lyra began emulating them in subtle ways, arranging her quarters, monitoring her gear, practicing small tasks with care. Each tiny action built her discipline. The greatest test came in the endurance chamber. This time, Holt did not raise the gravity or unleash a simulated ambush immediately. Instead, he had her carry weighted packs across a long, obstacle-filled corridor, repeating the journey over and over. Hours passed. Sweat poured down her face. Her legs burned, her hands blistered, but this time, she did not collapse. She took careful breaths. She shifted her weight strategically. She allowed her mind to guide her body instead of fighting it blindly. She fell once, then rose without complaint. She misstepped twice, then adjusted. By the time Holt called an end, she could barely move, but she had finished. "You endured," Holt said simply. "And you adapted. That is the difference. Strength alone is not enough. Understanding, discipline, And patience create endurance, Lyra nodded, exhausted but proud. For the first time, she felt she was learning something that mattered, not just for pride, but for survival. In the quiet of her quarters, Lyra reflected on the lessons. She remembered the breaking point during survival drills, the pain, the fear, and the moment she had almost given up. She thought of her people, of the luxury and protection she had always known. Her heart swelled with a strange respect for the humans. They had survived countless dangers, countless wars, countless hostile worlds. They had endured not because they were born strong, but because they trained, learned, and adapted. And slowly she realized a truth that hurt and inspired her at the same time. Her body's pain was a small price compared to the strength she could gain. Strength was not beauty or title. Strength was survival, endurance, and the ability to rise when everything in the universe tried to crush you. Holt entered her quarters again the next morning. "You are different," he said. "Yesterday you relied on stubbornness. Today you have discipline. Tomorrow you will face the final endurance test, a simulated planetary crisis. How you respond will show if you truly understand human strength." Lyra stood straighter than she had before. "I will be ready, Captain." Holt's eyes narrowed slightly, but not in doubt. In them was approval, the recognition that a spirit once tested could learn. For the first time, Lyra felt a sense of partnership rather than opposition. Humans had taught her through challenge, through pain, through discipline, and she had learned to trust them, even as she tested her own limits. That evening, she practiced quietly in her quarters. Movements she had struggled with weeks ago were now smoother. Breathing techniques, weight shifting, precise steps, all felt more natural. She realized that her pride no longer dictated her actions. Instead, her mind guided her body. Her body still ached, and it would for days, but she felt stronger than ever. Not because she was unbreakable, but because she had endured and learned to rise despite the breaking. And in that quiet triumph, she understood something she had never known before. Humans were not just survivors. They were teachers, guides, and models of endurance that her people could never match in comfort and strength combined. She had faced the human challenge and survived, not unscathed, but wiser. The galaxy was still vast, dangerous, and unknown, but Princess Lyra, once defiant and naive, now carried within her a new gift, the understanding of human endurance, and she was ready for whatever came next. The Resolute moved silently through the star-strewn void, its engines a steady pulse against the cold darkness. Inside, the ship hummed with life. Crew members checked instruments, ran simulations, and prepared for routine missions. But today, there was tension in the air, a subtle warning that peace could shatter at any moment. Princess Lyra stood at the observation deck, her robe still showing signs of wear from the weeks of training. She no longer felt fragile. Her muscles ached. Yes, but they ached with purpose. Her chest still rose heavily after exercises, but each breath was deliberate and controlled. She had endured more than she thought possible. Captain Holt approached, his presence calm but commanding. "Princess," he said, "we have an incoming alert. An unexpected meteor storm is headed toward our current path. If we do not act carefully, the ship could sustain heavy damage." Lyra straightened. "What can I do to help?" Holt's eyes flickered briefly with surprise. He was accustomed to humans handling crises, not relying on alien passengers for action. Yet her tone carried determination, not hesitation. "Stay with the crew," he said. "Follow my instructions and act quickly when needed. We all work as one during situations like this." The storm approached faster than anticipated. The Resolute shook as small meteors struck the hull, setting off alarms that rang sharply through the corridors. Crew members rushed to stations, securing equipment and monitoring shields. Lyra followed Holt's orders, running from one station to another, assisting wherever she could. She monitored systems, relayed messages, and helped injured crew members navigate debris-filled hallways. Her body strained under the effort, but she refused to stop. Holt watched her from the command bridge. Her movements were precise, her reactions quick. She was not as physically strong as the humans around her, but she had something equally important: focus, endurance, and an unbroken spirit. A large meteor struck near the engine room, causing a critical failure. Sparks flew, smoke filled the corridors, and emergency lights flashed red. Crew members worked frantically to stabilize the damage. "Princess," Holt's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Engine containment is critical. I need you there to assist with the secondary controls. Can you handle it?" Lyra swallowed the fear that rose in her chest. She could feel her muscles screaming from exhaustion, but she remembered the lessons from weeks of training, discipline, patience, and endurance. She nodded to herself. "I can do it," she whispered. She sprinted down the corridors, helping crew members move debris, guiding injured soldiers, and finally reaching the engine room. The room was chaos, wires sparking, smoke curling through the air, and human engineers struggling to stabilize the core. Without hesitation, Lyra assessed the situation. She remembered Holt's instructions from their lessons on systems and teamwork. She followed the protocols exactly, assisting in rerouting power, securing loose panels, and monitoring temperature levels. Her hands were steady despite the heat and shaking metal. Her heart pounded, but not with panic, only with determination. Every lesson she had learned now guided her. Minutes passed like hours. Sweat soaked her hair and clothing. Sparks flew dangerously close, but she continued, moving methodically, never giving in to fear or exhaustion. "Princess," one engineer said, "I didn't know you could handle this." "I learned," she said simply, focusing on the controls. The engine stabilized. Alarms slowed. Smoke dissipated. Holt's voice came through the earpiece, calm but filled with quiet approval. "Well done, Princess. You made the right choices. Your training paid off." For the first time, Lyra felt not just accomplishment but respect, earned through effort, endurance, and application of everything she had learned from the humans. The meteor storm continued to batter the ship, but the crew, now bolstered by the princess's courage and assistance, worked efficiently as a team. They adjusted shields, repaired external damage, and guided the ship through the final, most dangerous cluster of meteors. Lyra moved tirelessly, helping whenever she could, coordinating small teams and checking the injured. Every step was calculated, every decision deliberate. Her body ached more than ever, but she had learned that the mind could guide it past the breaking point, that spirit could compensate when strength alone was insufficient. When the last meteor passed and the Resolute emerged with only minor damage, silence fell over the bridge. Crew members glanced at each other, breathing heavily, then slowly broke into nods of relief. Holt turned to Lyra. She was still standing, sweat-streaked and exhausted, but her eyes shone with quiet triumph. "You did well," he said simply. "Not many could have endured this and contributed so effectively. Your people may see you as a princess, but here you are a member of this crew. You earned your place." Lyra felt a warmth rise in her chest. Respect, not from flattery, not from fear, but from recognition earned through action. She realized that human strength was not just physical. It was discipline, endurance, teamwork, and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. She nodded to Holt. "Thank you, Captain. I will not forget these lessons." In the days following the meteor storm, the atmosphere aboard the Resolute shifted. Crew members who had been wary of the alien princess now treated her as an equal. They trusted her, collaborated with her, and included her in briefings and missions. Lyra herself noticed the change. She no longer felt fragile or out of place. Her body still ached from the intense training and the storm, but her spirit was stronger than ever. She had learned to endure, adapt, and act decisively. She had learned what it truly meant to survive in the galaxy. Holt continued to guide her, but now as a mentor rather than a disciplinarian. Together they reviewed systems, practiced drills, and refined strategies. Lyra absorbed every lesson eagerly, applying her training not for pride, but for responsibility and the well-being of those around her. One evening, as the ship drifted through a quiet sector of space, Lyra stood at the observation deck once more. Stars stretched endlessly, but she no longer felt the same awe mixed with fear that she had felt on her first day aboard the Resolute. Holt approached quietly. "You have changed," he said. "I have learned," Lyra replied. "Not just how humans survive, but why. Strength is not just in the body, it is in the mind, the spirit, and the willingness to endure when all else fails." Holt nodded. "And now, your people can learn from you as well. They will see what discipline and endurance can achieve, not through force, but through example." Lyra smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and humility. She had come aboard the Resolute as a defiant princess, certain her rank and intelligence made her above the hardships of humans. Now she understood that true respect and strength were earned, not given. Weeks later, the mission continued peacefully. Lyra moved confidently among the crew, assisting in operations, monitoring systems, and even mentoring junior officers in survival and discipline techniques she had mastered. The humans trusted her judgment, and she had learned to trust herself in ways she never had before. One afternoon, Holt called her to the bridge. The stars were calm, and the Resolute drifted through space as a silent guardian. "Princess," Holt said, "you have come far. Not just in skill, but in understanding. You have endured what many cannot, and yet you have grown stronger. Your people will see the value of what you have learned here." Lyra nodded, her silver blue eyes steady. "I will carry these lessons back to them, not with arrogance, but with respect for what humans endure every day." Holt's rare smile appeared, brief but sincere. "You have earned our respect, Princess, not just as royalty but as a member of this crew. That is a rare achievement." Lyra's heart lifted. She realized that respect was more powerful than privilege, strength was more valuable than beauty, and endurance, both physical and mental, defined the difference between survival and failure. As the ship sailed onward, the princess stood at the observation deck, gazing at the stars. She felt a quiet satisfaction deep in her chest. She had fallen, struggled, and endured pain beyond what she had thought possible. Yet through it all, she had risen, adapted, and gained the respect of humans, creatures who had once seemed so different, so alien. She had become more than a princess. She had become a symbol of perseverance, a bridge between her people and humanity. And as the Resolute continued its journey through the endless galaxy, Princess Lyra understood something she had never known before. True strength was not born of comfort or title. It was earned through endurance, discipline, and courage, and she was ready for whatever the universe might bring next.